Hindenburg Research published an extensive report questioning the accounting methods of Carvana. By page 2, you'd have to be chugging company Kool-Aid if you're not wondering about the stock price, loan sales, company debt, and the books. Is this a nothing burger? Get your own copy of the report at hindenburgresearch.com. Follow along, say hello, make new friends, grow your network, and learn from the best on ATI number 1, ATI Auto Business. What's up, ecosystem? Welcome back to ATI Auto Business, automotive ecosystem where everyone learns more about the automotive industry. Let's get started with top industry news and headlines that include tariffs, delays and impact, CoPart repo double standards, and Tesla Austin robotaxi June. This is show 384 in a row on a Tuesday night, and it is questionable. We've seen reports and questions. We've seen folks trying to do the math, and it's hard to tell. It's become a tug of war of, I don't believe it. What don't you believe? Why can't you see it? And then he talks about it, and what is going on? Oh, those are drones? Oh, lots of drones? Oh yeah, no, there's nothing to see here. It's nothing. It's not an enemy. Well, we don't buy it. We want to know. Can we tell the difference now, or are we being gaslighted? What is the truth? What is going on? Are you being manipulated and doubting your perception of reality? You know, when you see this enormous stock sale, and then obviously that's going to affect the stock, but that's not the case, and it has to do with future value of money and all this stuff. I mean, are we playing Jenga? What are we doing? I say get to know your ecosystem. Yeah, I could do a show about dispatching and all this stuff, but man, there's so much more to the automotive industry than all that new, used, dealer auction logistics and more. And then, is it a nothing burger? You know, nobody really liked Robin Hood back in the day. He's awesome now that he's gone, and he went through all that pain. That's why we're in the neutral zone. It might matter later. Tuesday night's automotive ecosystem, 7 o'clock Central Time. Last week, we were talking about Insight LPR. That really was a great panel. If you missed it, go check it out. Thursdays at noon, industry logistics. Last week we learned about HaulX. If you heard of HaulX, you should check that out. If you want to know, okay, well, how great can it be? There's a ton of new stuff in the video descriptions that I don't think you've heard. This Thursday, we're going to talk to Dispatch Minds. What's that? Tune in. Thursday, noon Central. Okay, let's do some news. Thanks for jumping in the live chat. Appreciate it. I know it's not popular. Don't worry. You can just watch. You can watch live, on demand, get the podcast. Tariffs. It's all about the tariffs. Or is it? What is going on? All we know for sure is we're now on a roller coaster. And yeah, you're going to see some blowback, but the gun has been aimed or whatever, and strap in, because here we go. And we are on pins and needles waiting to see what happens next. And maybe that's the strategy. So nobody knows what's going to happen. We're seeing a lot of interesting posts. The tariff war was just started, paused, could be painful, will be painful, could add 10,000 vehicles to the cost of some vehicles, 4,000 for many. Some may just stop production. Who knows? But there is going to be confusion at border crossings for those units. Yeah, not just the people. And American consumers and workers will suffer too. Ontario will bear the brunt of auto tariffs. Before you mutter something about foreign cars, keep in mind American cars have parts that go into those cars. They were made in America. They go back to the other locations and then come back. There's a lot of supply chain that isn't obvious, that we don't see. And yeah, there are other serious problems: migration, drugs, unfair trade, that have to be dealt with. It's just that this is a pretty dicey way of doing it. But it's an option. And the suppliers want you to know, suppliers are going to get hurt maybe the most, especially smaller suppliers that fear they'll be stuck holding the bag on higher related tariff costs. They have less capital, less room for error. Any change in direction of policy is going to really hurt them. And we got another 30 days of anxiety. Great. We were able to make the mortgage one more month. Severe consequences for the U.S. vehicle supplier industry, jeopardizing American jobs, which is interesting because campaign trail, jobs, jobs, jobs. Nobody can absorb that kind of cost. Seamless automotive trade in North America accounts for $300 billion in economic value. Not only keeps us globally competitive, it supports auto industry jobs, vehicle choice, and vehicle affordability in America. I know. We have to stand on convention or it's a point. Trump tariffs could wreck the trucking recovery. I know it's not popular. Trucking moves 85% of goods across the southern U.S. border, 67% across the northern border. 25% tariff levied against Mexico could see the price of a new tractor equipment. This gets into the cost for carriers, adding millions of dollars in operating costs. I mean, any change, someone's going to get hurt. Interesting cartoon, but pointed out, Canada blinked, not the U.S. What happens if they don't blink? How many times will your opponent blink? Trump tariffs delays what it means for car shoppers. It is good news for car shoppers. 10% on all goods coming into the U.S. from China, but delayed 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods. As everybody knows, it was Monday that it was Tariff City, and Tuesday it was Delay City, but there's still China. And I know that it's kind of, seems like it's easy to dislike China. 10% tariff on all Chinese products went into effect 12:01 a.m. Tuesday. The result of an executive order that said he was aimed at pressuring Beijing to crack down on fentanyl, which is interesting. So they gave tariffs on coal, natural gas, farm machinery, and other products. So here we go with China. This was posted on CBT, I believe it was yesterday. Automaker stocks decline amid Trump tariffs, Canada retaliation. And at the same time, we're still pumping this message that we're having a golden age. Can we stop with the golden age stuff? It's not real. In other news, an update from the ARA CoPart meeting. Last week, the ARA Board of Directors met with leadership from CoPart to address concerns regarding their involvement in the repossession sector. Primary issues centered on CoPart securing impounded vehicles on behalf of national lenders, vehicles that constitute repossessions. While CoPart maintains these units are merely tows or transports to the auction, in reality, any vehicle subject to an installment agreement secured prior to the completion of the agreement is, by definition, a repossession. CoPart disagrees with this assessment by the ARA. ARA has long opposed the double standards that have plagued the recovery industry for decades. The issue is yet another example of such discrepancies spreading rapidly. CoPart utilizes both employees and a network of subcontractors to facilitate recoveries. However, repossession agents operating in the space must adhere to strict regulatory and insurance requirements, including explicit non-subcontractor use. CoPart, under the claim that these recoveries are not repossessions, asserts that these same requirements do not apply to them. Stay tuned, we'll find out more about that. And Tesla plans paid robotaxi service in Austin in June, says Elon Musk. Tesla will finally launch a long-promised commercial robotaxi service in June, starting in Austin, before expanding the ride-hailing network across the U.S. and globally, he says. The proof is in the pudding. We're going to be launching unsupervised full self-driving as a paid service in Austin in June. Tesla's full self-driving software is classified as an advanced driver assistance feature that requires a human supervisor for safety. Musk previously predicted in 2019 that Tesla would have 1 million robotaxis on the road by 2020. Musk has been promising autonomous Teslas for a decade. Musk said autonomous vehicles will generate vastly more revenue and profits for Tesla than selling non-autonomous vehicles to consumers. And Carvana's in the news today that they're expanding ADESA Clear, its online wholesale platform with retail feel. ADESA Clear, a new proprietary online auction product the company developed and started testing in late 2023, around the time some competitors were shutting down. ADESA's extensive wholesale auto expertise and Carvana's deep technology and digital merchandising capabilities, optimized for efficiency and transparency. Fees are also clearly displayed. Transparency. Clear condition reports, providing engine and audio recordings on every car listed on Clear, along with OBD2 scans. You can see very plainly everything that we know to be wrong with the car, to lean very heavily into what we've learned on the retail side of the business, and bring that same transparency to our wholesale buyers. Our transparency is incredible. On this installment of What Are You Talking About, I'll make it quick. I saw that your company made a video podcast at NADA. I got a question. Where can I see it or listen to it? Or did you bury it? I haven't seen any links from your NADA podcast, and I'm wondering, why'd you do that? For the spectacle of it? You spent all that energy and space and time and money to make a recording at a live event, the most expensive live event of the year, where people network, demo, educate, sell stuff, and you took that super expensive opportunity to make a throwaway talk show. Seriously, what? I don't know how many booths I saw with business executives sitting in a row on bar stools like it's an episode of The View, or a one-on-one cross table about as exciting as a job interview. And guess what? Your show and The View, super boring and uncomfortable. What are people supposed to think as they walk by and see that? Hey, can you hear that? What are they doing? I don't know. Just keep walking. And how much did your NADA booth cost? 50 grand? 100 grand? With flights, hotels, drinks, parties, 200 grand? And you chose to make a video. Can I talk to your supervisor? I get it. There's a couple of Kool-Aid drinkers that act like they're the life of the party, and you think bringing that in-house makes sense. And you already destroyed your ROI the minute you booked that booth. So why not make a TV show? But here's a tip. Next year, give a presentation. Create a schedule with those presentation times. It'll look like you're actually doing something relevant to your business, and people might actually pay attention. Then record that. No guests, no weather, no food, no 5-camera empty show. Educate people about your business. And if you enjoy celebrity attention along the way, good for you. Otherwise, what are you talking about? Call me. That is the memo. It's ATI Auto Business, where everyone learns more about the automotive industry, more than you bargained for. New, used, dealer, auction, logistics, and more. I don't ship cars. I move information. I stand on a soapbox making a podcast. Go to atiautobusiness.com. Contact me. I'll keep it a secret. Do me a favor. After this, stick around. What we're going to do is I'm going to go into the Nothing Burger research report. I'm going to do that. Panel, stick around. I got to get through this research report. It's just a Nothing Burger. We'll be right back.
Transport Auto Quoter is by far the leading auto quoting software on the market, and the only auto quoter with a pro version that comes preset with accurate pricing for anywhere in the U.S. So you don't have to worry about it. The best part is that no change with your current software is needed. Just plug TAQ in and start booking jobs. Carriers can easily plug TAQ into their current websites and start making money right away. I bet you're wondering how we do this instantly and accurately 24/7. Well, constant analytics is the key. Our Price Watch team is constantly monitoring current market conditions, paying close attention to seasonal and quick-moving industry changes. At the end of the day, it takes a lot of time and data to maintain good pricing, time that most of us just don't have on a daily basis. So free yourself up. Using TAQ Pro is really a no-brainer. Save time and money, maximizing your leads and optimizing your online investments. You'll finally be able to sleep well at night knowing that TAQ is on the job selling for you 24/7. Never missing a potential job.
Are you completely stressed out from all the calls and the contracts and the verifications of loads where nobody ever answers the phone? Call Murphy Auto Dispatch Services today. Murphy Auto Dispatch Services has over 15 years in the transport industry. We are your office while you are on the road. We book, we verify, and we bill out your loads for you. We have an excellent accounting staff and an even better dispatch team. Give us a call today at 417-273-0021, or if you want to email me, it's murphyautotransport31@yahoo.com. Give us a call today.
Need a faster way to move vehicles? Draver has you covered. Whether you're an OEM, fleet, rental company, or a dealership, Draver's network of 20,000 contract drivers gets vehicles moved 75% faster. From valet services to delivery, repositioning, and auction moves, Draver handles it all. With insurance coverage and expert support, your logistics are in good hands. Ready to try with the Draver Now app? Testing out Draver services is simple. Download the app today, request a move, and experience how Draver can transform your logistics. Or contact us today to learn about our full suite of services.
How do you move a fleet of rental cars to different locations on the fly and you've only got 48 hours? You need a shockingly fast nationwide vehicle relocation platform. Visit Draver.com. Okay, here we go. Is it really a nothing burger? It's the Carvana Hindenburg research report. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers. Fair use of public information refers to the legal concept that allows individuals to utilize portions of publicly available information. Anyone can use fair use of the uses for purposes such as commentary, news reporting, and teaching, as you'll see here tonight. This is the report as seen on the HindenburgResearch.com site. I'm going to put the link in the live chat. Feel free to, you don't even have to download. You just click on it and you can follow along. Carvana, a father-son accounting grift for the ages, is the title. Carvana, a $44 billion online car dealer founded in 2012. Main business, an online platform that allows retail customers to buy and sell used cars. Despite facing bankruptcy risks in 2022 and 2023, Carvana's stock spiked 284% in 2024, with investors believing the company's worst days are behind it. However, research including extensive document review and 49 interviews with industry experts, former Carvana employees, competitors, and related parties of the company, undertaken over the course of 4 months, shows Carvana's turnaround is a mirage. Research uncovered $800 million in loan sales to a suspected undisclosed related party, along with details on how accounting manipulation and lax underwriting have fueled temporary reported income growth, all while insiders cash out billions in stock. Findings of the investigation, Carvana is exorbitantly valued, trading at an 845% higher sales multiple relative to online car peers CarMax and AutoNation, a 754% premium on a forward earnings. The company has approximately $4.8 billion in net debt and is junk rated by ratings agencies. Used vehicle prices have declined over 20% in the past 3 years, according to the Manheim Price Index. Subprime auto loan delinquencies are now higher than during the global financial crisis. Previously, CEO Ernie Garcia III's father, Ernest Garcia II, sold $3.6 billion in stock between August 2020 and August 2021. Since 2023, Carvana has touted a bright future and posted 3 consecutive quarters of modest positive net income, an aggregate of $245 million despite stress in the used auto market. For every dollar in net income it reported, the company's added $139 in market cap, a $34 billion market cap increase. With Carvana shares up approximately 42 times, father Ernest Garcia II has sold another $1.4 billion in Carvana stock. Almost 26% of Carvana's gross profit consisted of sales of customer auto loans to third parties, largely in the risky subprime and deep subprime space. Carvana has relied on a purchase commitment agreement with Ally Financial, to which it sold $3.6 billion of vehicle loans in 2023, approximately 60% of its total originations. Carvana has told investors for at least 6 years that it is seeking to diversify outside of its relationship with Ally, but thus far has not announced new financing partners. After calling off an early agreement in principle with Carvana around 2019, a Wells Fargo senior manager is quoted as saying, "As we dug into it, the more we learned, the less we liked about it," citing specific concerns about lax underwriting and related party loan servicing. As subprime auto has declined, Ally has amended its arrangement with Carvana 5 times in the last 2 years. Each time, Carvana redacts crucial information that would help investors understand the terms of the relationship. In September 2024, Ally's stock fell 20% after warning investors that on the retail auto side, our credit challenges have intensified. In the past 2 years, Carvana sold $800 million in loans to an unrelated third party. The mystery buyer made up 18.3%, 16.3% of total loan sales in Q2 and Q3 2024. Lien filings reveal the buyer is likely a trusted affiliate with Cerberus Capital, where Carvana director, chairman of Global Investments, is indicated the new buyer is an undisclosed related party, contrary to company's claims. 44% of loans for cars purchased in 2022 are underwater. Carvana's originate-to-sell model is highly skewed to packaging non-prime and subprime borrower loans. Per a former Carvana director, I don't think the model is much different than what we saw with the early 2000 mortgage-backed securities. Over 80% of its recent non-prime ABS deals have weighted average FICO scores in the deep subprime range. Carvana's toxic loan book is a result of lax underwriting standards. We actually approve 100% of the applicants, said a former Carvana director in an interview. 60-day delinquencies across its supposedly prime borrowers are over 4 times industry averages. A former Ally executive told, "Those loss numbers are high. The delinquencies across 30-60 buckets are high." Carvana's subprime loans had the highest increase in borrow extensions of any subprime auto issuer, a major sign of stress. Carvana's extensions more than doubled this year, while most peers saw declines. Carvana's increase in borrow extensions is enabled by its loan servicer, an affiliate of private car dealership DriveTime, run by Carvana's CEO's father. The company seems to be avoiding reporting higher delinquencies by granting loan extensions instead. Carvana appears to be dumping unreported costs of extended warranties onto related party DriveTime, resulting in artificially inflated revenue and profitability. Instead of marking down inventory, Carvana can offload cars to related party DriveTime at a premium. Over the last 3 fiscal years, Carvana has generated over $105 million in revenue from selling cars wholesale to DriveTime. A former Carvana director responsible for wholesale inventory said, "Selling cars to DriveTime is a lever that's not talked about. It's kind of like Fight Club. There's certain things we don't talk about, and we don't talk about DriveTime." Carvana's independent audit committee has 2 individuals that served on the board of related party DriveTime. One independent member of the audit committee was previously suspended by the New York Stock Exchange after he sent money to Carvana's CEO's father in contravention of a prohibited order. Carvana's CEO's father, the key shareholder dumping billions in stock, previously pled guilty to felony bank fraud allegations that he helped a company report fake accounting income through sham transactions. Carvana's loans held on the books have increased 50% since 2021 to $553 million in quarter 3 2024. Carvana uses an accounting treatment that records no loss reserves on these loans at booking. On May 4th, Carvana reported Q1 2023 earnings, showing a 41% year-over-year decline in sales. CEO Ernie Garcia blamed the delay on loan sales on uncertainties in the market. 2 days later, Carvana announced the best quarter in company history. In 2023, Q3 2024, Carvana reported over $3,000 in retail gross profit per unit, a key metric for investors to understand the profitability from the sale of retail units. Carvana inflates this key metric by dumping an estimated $390 million of selling costs into SG&A annually, in stark contrast to accounting practices at competitors. Just to note, it is true, Ernie Garcia, with his pled guilty to felony bank fraud charges. I know that may seem below the belt, but this is something that everybody is really thinking about in the back of their minds, is does this have anything to do with it? Plus, when you look at the competitors in 2023, off lease, used car retailer, they filed for Chapter 11. Scarce supply, price inflation, lack of demand, affordability, significant challenges, competitive pressure. Also, a month later, Shift Technologies. They stopped selling used cars online. BK, layoffs, net losses, significant losses, trying to raise capital, restructure the balance sheet, straddle with debt, low demand, rinse and repeat. And then Vroom in 2024, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Cash strapped, attempting to restructure, over $300 million in debt. There's the Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index. You're looking at Carvana, and they're saying everything's great. You look at other sources of how dealers are doing, numbers going down. Why? Because their brand is better? They're fine. Numbers don't say they're fine. Balance sheets look kind of rough there in the delinquencies. So on our panel tonight, even Frank Knox, he's posted on LinkedIn. He's going to be here tonight. Is Carvana an unsustainable model or an innovator in challenging the status quo? Is it really unknown? Is it a drone? You can find, responses online. Hindenburg's wrong. Hindenburg's out of business. All that stuff. It's a tit for tat. And this stuff's great. We're loving it. I don't know. I just know that when I read this stuff about the loans to Ally, that is interesting. So are they in the car business or in the selling loans business? Plus there's news about Ally and their restructuring, moving around. You know what? Why be in lane 8 at 9:30 when you can just have the whole shebang? Is it a nothing burger? Do me a favor. Now that is one lively live chat. I am now going to crank up the panel. Here we go, panel. And while I'm doing that, I know that the timing on this one is tough. I really didn't want to run any ads because I'm not in a running ad kind of mood at the moment. It is 7:30. If you're just joining now, we're going to crank up the Carvana Research Report Nothing Burger panel. And, and away we go. Here we go. Let's see. Wow. Mic check. 1, 2. Welcome to the show. We are now live, panel. And that was a lot of stuff. And you're just suddenly live. Paul, I can see you. Darrell, I can see you. Thank you so much for saying hello. Paul, please say hello and tell us a little bit more about you.
Howdy and good evening. Boy, I'll tell you, this is Jim Horan asked me to come on here with you, Jay, and we've seen each other a few times. I don't know that we formally met, but hey, Jim, and Frank and Darrell know all these guys. I'm really humbled to be in this group, frankly, but my name is Paul Brobson. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Trusted Sale, and we focus our attention on helping dealers to certify their off-brand inventory. So we know a thing or two about the used car market.
Thank you, Paul. Darrell, also your first time on ATI. Please say hello and tell us a bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Darrell Steed here. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite, guys. And I have Smart Wolf Consulting, so you see the image behind me. I do build buying centers, so used car acquisition strategies for service drive, trade, and private party acquisition for stores, as well as training academies for hiring and developing the buyer, not the seller. But I'm really thankful for being here and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Darrell. Frank, also first time on ATI. Please say hello. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you for the invite. Certainly appreciate being here tonight with these brainiacs that are on here. Frank Knox. I am with Unique Auto Sales, Sourcing, and Solution. We have a three-part sort of strategy that we approach sourcing inventory with. I'm a little bit of the opposite of Darrell in that we focus primarily our attention on off-site auctions, and people ask me all the time, how can you do that? Well, I have 4 individuals that work with me that are that act as virtual buyers, and they go out and source inventory at every possible auction platform that's out there. And so we've been doing that for about almost 2 years now, very successful. And on the other side of that, we have our wholesale division that is run by the owner and president of Unique Auto Sales, and that's Justin Campbell. Been around since 2008. Doing a lot of wholesaling in the Southeast. So again, happy to be here. Certainly appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Frank. Jim, welcome back.
Thanks.
Thanks for bringing all your friends. That's awesome. Please say hello and then kick us off. What are we doing?
Yeah, thanks. New friends, really. And thanks, guys, for coming on. Just real quick, I'm a licensed Texas dealer. I'm also the CEO and founder of Retail My Ride. We're the first and only online platform that focuses entirely on promoting the retail consignment selling option for both sellers and dealers. So we inform and we connect private party and institutional sellers with our participating network dealers who are wanting to reap the benefits of integrating basically the consignment option into their other acquisition or existing acquisition strategies. So Darrell does a lot of the coaching, and Frank, like he said, focuses on auctions. We do the consignment, which is another option, and my good friend Paul there does all kinds of things with certified cars and retail, and probably need to catch up on them even more because I'm sure he's doing some new things. But thanks for having me, and thanks for having the group. I think it's a great subject and a good timing to do it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this is that, okay, so when I put shows together like this, I've been doing these lawsuit shows, and because you know what, I talked about podcasts in the segment earlier, there's about a jillion podcasts now. So if we're going to do a podcast, let's cover something big. There's a lot of people interested in this topic from many different angles. And so how do we look at this report? And by the way, I'm going to say this. I noticed, because I keep track, when this came out, I don't remember when the report came out, but it was right after the new year. You saw it on other traditional media, automotive news, CBT news, auto remarketing. Now nobody's talking about it.
Right.
Is it a nothing burger? What's going on here?
Well, I'll plug in first, perhaps. I mean, as you were going through the report, I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to hit every one of those bullets. There's over 50 what I would call red flags. And to me, I've been in this industry long enough to know that it doesn't take 50 to at least question it, be a little bit curious, maybe suspicious, maybe even skeptical, and wonder if somebody is looking into it who has the authority or the expertise to look into it. So, but I'll do this. I summarized it from 50 red flags down to 4 areas that basically just kind of draw attention mostly to me. And I've been around the auto industry with GMAC, who's now Ally, by the way. I worked with them. I worked for them for 15 years back in the 80s and 90s. And when you see flags like this, I think we've all been in the financial services industry long enough to know that whether it's auto or whether it's even some of these other industries, there's some. These are similar type red flags that have ended badly, I guess. But again, not passing judgment or saying that I know that there is something wrong there. But 4 things that I kind of came up with that stood out the most amongst that 50 was the fact that there's a pretty obvious attempt to boost earnings from these loan sales and this debt restructuring. That's aimed typically by a company who's struggling and needs to raise capital. So they need, and in their case, stock prices to go up. There's profitability metrics there that are potentially inflated. I say potentially, in case it's not. But when you start looking at the one that I think we're all been talking about a lot since the report came out, was the GPU, the gross profit per unit, and how they can go from being in a hole to being not only number one in the industry, but number one by 1.5 or 2 times their next closest competitor. And that type of profitability drives the future picture of what this company potentially could do. And I think that's aimed at rising stock prices as well. There is one of the bullets in there talked about how the auditing firm, I don't remember the name of the person or the firm, but there's some ties there to the drive time with the auditors, and that kind of concerns me in terms of weak auditing and weak oversight internally or even externally. There's a whole lot of what I would call insider behavior related to related parties and unrelated parties. So you've got drive time out there. You have now ADESA that they own, and they could be doing some things there with, again, propping up profitability and earnings. It's just an opportunity to do it. I'm not saying they're doing it, but when you have things like this model of full vertical integration, it makes puts the opportunity there in front of you. And then you have this huge relationship with Ally. Now all of a sudden, I think one of the bullets talked about Ally is kind of backing off a little bit and kind of stepping back and maybe going a little softer. What I find interesting is, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but Cerberus was mentioned in there about how they may be stepping up and actually maybe doing something. Cerberus actually purchased GMAC, formerly, which is Ally now, but Cerberus bought GMAC from General Motors. I think it was back in 2006 when General Motors was bleeding and about to go bankrupt. And now all of a sudden, Cerberus kind of resurfaces. So I find that kind of interesting. And then the very last thing would be, there's going to be some headwinds coming. It talked about it in there. That's really stood out. Like I said, I'm a retail dealer. I know there was compression on margins and so forth last year. Will be this year. We all talk about it. Everybody in this group talks about the challenges of acquisitions and vehicle sourcing is going to be bigger this year than probably in the past. Well, it will be. So what's interesting, and I'll let you guys talk. I'm sorry if I'm going too long, but what I find interesting is probably in the next week or two, I'd imagine we're going to get fourth quarter results coming out for Carvana. And the question becomes, and Frank, you raised this question: is this sustainable? Do they have a real model that's so unique and so dynamic and so awesome that they can sustain it, or is this unsustainable? And we're going to find out pretty quick. Even if they end up dropping down and doing well against like their biggest competitor, Carvana, maybe AutoNation, that'll be a plus for them. But we could see something as an eye opener when we see the next earnings reports from them. So that's my take. Hope it wasn't too long.
It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would agree. I think there are some red flags that individuals can be very concerned about. But in that, I think you showed my post that I put on LinkedIn, and that was the number one thing that I was concerned about is how are they getting this PVR, and is it drastically different from a CarMax, right? Like that's who I tend to compare them to. So then I started digging a little bit deeper and trying to understand more about, okay, so we're concerned with Carvana selling loans off, but CarMax has done that really since the beginning of time. I remember back in 2008 when things got really challenging and CarMax got into really significant trouble because we couldn't sell those loans off and the buckets were filling and we couldn't finance customers at that point. So, when people talk about selling the loans off, I don't necessarily get that concerned about that. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, what about the debt? Everyone's talking about the debt that Carvana is carrying. And, when you look at the debt that CarMax is carrying, I want to say that they have somewhere around $18 billion in debt. And most of that obviously is generated from their CarMax Auto Finance. But, is that all that different from Carvana in having Bridgecrest, right? Like they do their own captive financing as well. So there's a number of things out there that would say, yes, there are red flags, but then there's a number of things that say they have a solid business model as well, that a lot of people have started to adopt it and try to follow that business model. The last thing that I'll say, if I were really concerned in that article, there's mention of off lease only, and I happened to be there when off lease only closed the doors. I was the director of purchasing for off lease only and knew what that felt like when Ally showed up to get those 5,000 or so cars that we had in stock at that point. So I know what that feels like, but I also knew that, when I looked at our model and looked at the amount of aging inventory that we had that continued to build because of the market, I knew that we were headed towards a place where we were going to feel some pain. And so I took a look and I looked at Carvana's aging inventory. And when you look at their aging inventory, they only have 19% of their cars over 60 days and 6% of their cars over 90 days. I compare that to the average dealer, and the average dealer, they blow the average dealer away with how they manage their inventory. So I don't see a problem in really how they manage their inventory, especially when that inventory is sitting around a $25,000 average price point, when affordability is what rules in this day and age. So I see some red flags, but I don't know that I'm as concerned as a lot of others that are out there.
Great.
Yeah, Frank, I think that's interesting. Oddly enough, I had two.
Sorry, Paul, you're next. Darrell, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You're good. You're good. No, Darrell. I took the wind out. Darrell, please keep going.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, so Frank, when I saw a couple things so they say it's $3,200 GPU, but then they posted they're a total profit of 7,000 and change, which oddly enough, I'd like to break it all down for layman's terms, because you start looking at these things and who knows how they measure what they do for their profit. Everybody does it a little different. Where is this $7,000 coming from? Because you can take a gross market cap of what the average sale is for Carvana, and then what their average purchase. And if I plus one plus one, if it doesn't equal 2, then it doesn't equal 7,000 and change. So I would love to have some transparency of where this magical money comes from when you look at their offers, and then you look at CarMax's offers or any of the other ones that guarantee them, and then what they're selling them for. There's only so much spread, and that's not $7,000 per car. The other thing that I found was interesting, and there's a couple of banks that got their hand in the cookie jar, was the loan extensions. I love that term too. That's basically fraud. Because when you're doing loan extensions because they're more than 90 days past due, that's so that you can look good. That's not typical business practice. And you ask yourself, okay, at some point, when do you say you're no longer going to give them an extension, or do you keep extending it? Because there is parameters on a loan of how long it can be extended before it has to be reclaimed, depending on the bank they're using. So that'd be really interesting if Ally's making concessions, or if their own captives making concessions. And what I would say, when you see there's smoke, there's usually fire. If you guys weren't familiar with a company that was out there that was doing some very unique business practices, and then all of a sudden the Justice Department got involved and we don't hear about them anymore, and that was Paul Blanco. And similar type of things where it was like they were making this money and it was different things for finance and predatory practice, but no one heard a thing. And then all of a sudden you heard a lot. And so when I look at that, you can't tell me you're making $7,000 a car, and CarMax, who has made money almost every quarter for God knows how many years, and AutoNation, who has all these stores, are making half of that or a third of that, and you somehow magically bought cars for the same price, but then you're selling them for $3,000 more than everybody else. For the average person, when I saw that, I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Now, I will give Carvana a little bit of grace. The only grace I'll give them. The Hindenburg report, yes, it has been closed down. But oddly enough, I wanted to do a little research so I didn't seem like a knuckle dragger when I came on here. And they have only been found to be accurate on their Hindenburg reports at 20% of their reports. So the reports they come out with are designed for short sale opportunities, and they want to do that to disrupt stock markets, and only 20% of the stuff they've put out has actually been accurate to terms. So outside of that, though, when you do have 50 things, I think we can all probably say there's got to be a few of those that are probably a little close to real.
Paul.
Well, it's interesting because this is a good way to kind of wrap what all of you have said, which is is it a nothing burger, Jay? I don't know. It's kind of like the first time you have a Big Mac. You take all, you're like, wow, look at this. It's like a stacked burger. And you take it off, it's like, it's kind of a flimsy looking burger, but boy, it's got this special sauce. I don't know what that is, but it kind of tastes good. Okay. And look, there's another layer. I wonder what's next. And then you get there and it's just the same thing and over again. So I don't, maybe if that's a nothing burger, but unlike the Big Mac, this is like, seems to continue. It just grow. They always find another burger and bun.
It's a growing Big Mac. I like this.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like crazy. Like they bought ADESA. Everybody said, "What do you get?" I remember we were all like, "That's insane," but then they found a way. So I wouldn't count them out. The Hindenburg report is certainly, great discussion fodder for discussion, and there's a lot of things that were said tonight that I think are very accurate. The couple of things that from your report, the warranty reimbursements counting towards revenue seems very wonky to me. But I agree with the rest of the panel, $3,459 when the rest of the industry is seeing a 24% downturn on their margins. That doesn't work for me. And then the last thing I would just say to kind of finish it out is, it's going to come home to roost. It's good thing there's people like all the three guys that are on this call with us, because they are actually chipping away at this, private party acquisition world. And, I know that's been a good source for them, but let's be honest, diminished supply for used cars in the 1 to 5 years is at the lowest point it's ever been in the last 10 years. And it will climb out of it slow. It's not like, okay, all of a sudden it's going to go back up to 16 million. It's going to be at 12 million. Those 4 million cars, somebody's going to get them. And the shrinking pool of water I think will hurt Carvana and diminish supply.
I agree.
Yeah. The one thing I continue to go back to is, because we talk about their GPU and, CarMax does things very different in terms of how they list their GPU, right? And that's what I was alluding to in a post that I made. Like CarMax doesn't include their wholesale numbers in their GPU. They don't include, their CAF and their max care and all these other things that they're generating revenue and profit from. They don't lump them into that, number. But if they did, that number sits around, I think I posted $5,600 or somewhere around that. Right. So it brings it narrows the gap a little bit to go, okay, so now we're talking about a number that is about a $2,000 spread, all things considered, from CarMax to Carvana. Is it possible? Is it feasible to think that Carvana could gain $2,000 in efficiencies by having an ADESA who's doing their recon and having, hubs that they can easily get cars transported to and from? And you have to think about these big bop monsters that CarMax has sitting in every city and the amount of overhead that is getting pulled out of that profitability as well. Carvana doesn't have that. So that's where, again, I go back to and look and go, I wonder, could they gain that efficiency somehow to help them with their profitability? And my gut tells me, there's still something there, but I guess the optimist in me goes, I want to believe that, they could do it, right?
I mean, in this industry, I've been selling cars now for 12 years as a retail dealer, and that's a very small one, by the way. But, I mean, it used to be prior to COVID that $100 increment, $500 swing in GPU was a pretty big deal. If you could take it from 1,800 to 2,000, 2,200, you were doing great all of a sudden it's gone to 36 on a retail basis before you even work in the loans and all that.
Yeah.
So I go back to this. Again, I'm looking at it more from it almost feels like seen this movie before, read this book, and have we learned from it? I mean, whether it's intentional, whether there's overinflation, the end game is 6 months ago, 12 months ago, they knew they were in trouble and they knew that they needed to boost their stock price, and they achieved that. And so they did it through showing some really great numbers. I think Paul, I think Darrell, you said transparency would be nice. I mean, I look at now that they continue to again do the vertical integration. When if Carvana buys a car from ADESA, do they pay buyer fees that are now $600 or $700 or $800 per car, or does that get, they get to buy them for free? I mean, how does that work? And then again,
either way, it's a win, right?
What's that?
I said either way, it's a win, right?
Well, it is. That's
They
what I'm
get
saying,
it for
but
free, or they're paying themselves. So I mean,
but if the big stockholders got in a room and said, we're trading at $17 or whatever, now let's get. I mean, how did they get it up so high? It was to show the most robust turnaround in automotive history in such a short period of time. That's where I'm still a little bit, but not even more than a little bit. I'm very skeptical.
So, Jim, what you just said, I wanted to jump in there because what you just said is kind of where it starts. So what Frank said, if it's 5,600 and 7,200, that's not that big of a gap if they put everything together. However, because CarMax has the box stores, and mind you, I would love to see the reports for ADESA, not Carvana, because from what I have talked to people at ADESA, they're the ones carrying the holding cost, which means that's an expense that should be going to Carvana that's being carried by ADESA, which is that's a manipulation of money right there because you're not doing that. And then if they're not paying auction fees, it is a win, right? One of the companies is getting it. But are you doing that to prop up debt reduction? Or are you doing that and then it's hurting ADESA? Because if you go look at ADESA's health and vitality right now, they've lost market share every quarter for the last 8 to other auctions. So when you look at that, is who's really winning, and is it, if they're trying to raise funds, did we just go like this? Did we do a little right pocket, left pocket move and say, we're not going to charge rent, we're not going to charge recon, which would be very interesting to see how recon's getting billed. Is that to the auction or to the car or to the Carvana? And so if we're propping up numbers, CarMax would be better, obviously, because if we did that as well, they have a more inline scale. So does AutoNation. However, when you don't get all the things put out to you and you're redacting things and you're changing things and you see banks wanting to pull back, it's one of those things where banks don't typically pull back when you're feeding them that much business unless there's something wrong. Now, oddly enough, the bank that's pulling back happens to be directly resulted to a captive of Stellantis, which tying your hands to that right now would make them pull back to anything because their whole portfolio is in trouble. But then when you talk about the loan extensions, ADESA, it just looks like they're moving. It's almost like they've got 3 companies and they're moving them where they need to be to make one look good. And they'll worry about the other 2 in the fold.
Well, and that goes back to, again, there's rewards for companies that can successfully implement a vertical integration strategy. But it's very tempting then once you have those integrated parts to basically move things around. I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm just saying if you need to boost what the parent company or whatever you want to call it looks like for the next quarter in order to get that stock up, you can do it. And then once it's there, they say, let's just do it one time. And then once we're there, then we can put it back to wherever it was or make it all balance out again. That's all. I mean, I've seen that. I've seen that movie before.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to this, just it's surprising to me, maybe not to any of you, but maybe it should be, is that when big things like this come together, have come together, like Ally, who has auctions and loans and cars and repossession, and then you've got ADESA, who does auctions and does cars, and then you've got transportation, then you've got recon. Then the recon, now all of a sudden they're better than every dealer in the country as far as their recon process, or no, not their recon process, their turn. All of these things sound to me like, I don't know if you've ever been part of a corporate merger, most people can't even find their way to the men's room by the 6th month or 8th month, much less they've had this miracle, this miraculous ability to bring
Yeah.
all these things together to all be profitable. Sounds hard to believe.
I mean, part of what I've seen too in the last year with them is they have improved, it seems like, in areas where you can legitimately point to operational type stuff. Like they were in big hot water with their title processing. That seemed to have gone away. Now they're doing a very nice job with that. They probably are doing much better now with their transports. They have that in-house, right, where they've got their own trucks and moving stuff around. They probably have economies of scale with employee what do you call it, where they're very effective employees because they're more skilled at what they're doing now in a new model than they were 2 years ago. So there's legitimate, improvements in their operation. But is that secret sauce powerful enough to generate what we've seen? I guess is the question.
Well, I think the other question that, when you think about, the one thing I keep going back to is it scalable, what they have? Can they continue to grow? And I think that's what excites Wall Street, right? Is that
Sure.
what they have is a very scalable model. I'll give you an example. I was very curious, and I was always on the fence of I would never do business with Carvana. I'm a longtime CarMax guy. I absolutely adore CarMax. But my wife found a car on Carvana that she really, really wanted. And it was a frictionless process through and through. Every step of the way, they nailed it. Right down to the trade that we had, the delivery of the car, any issues that I thought were with the car, no problems whatsoever. So, I mean, that's a microcosm, but if that's an example of what they're capable of, then I don't worry about if they're able to scale the model. And again, that's what Wall Street gets really excited about is this model truly scalable? I believe, part of the reason, that CarMax is where they are and stock price is very stable is that there's nothing that's exciting, right? Like CarMax is, it's been around forever. They do a good job, but there's no real growth that people are looking at and saying, hey, this is the next big thing. Carvana, people are looking at that and saying, this is the next big thing. You have Amazon who's, jumped on board and doing this with Hyundai, right? And so now you have this major player who is the innovator in the industry. I look at that and say, kudos to them for going out and doing something that no one else is doing. And yes, again, I'm not ignoring the red flags. That's not lost on me, but I see more upside and I see more positives for them than I do negatives. And I'll echo some of what I read in the Hindenburg report. Some of it I look at and go, man, is that just sour grapes? Is that just an ex-employee just putting something out there?
Yeah, that's part of it.
I don't know. I mean, that's always part of it. And so
Yeah.
some of that you do take with a grain of salt, and you move on. But we all live in a world of facts. So give me the facts, and then I can really make a decision.
I will say that, just to put the fighters in their corners for a second, Ernie Garcia II, he's got a questionable past, whatever. Okay, but we don't bring it up every time we buy a car online. Same thing with Hindenburg Research. Obviously, they have their own situation at stake. Maybe they short stocks, as pointed out in the live chat. But again, does that overshadow all the flags raised in the report? And I think what's interesting, there's good points on both sides here. It's hard to say. This may be a nothing burger, but it doesn't mean it's over.
Well, the thing about scaling it, this is the interesting part, is that like most things, dealers, if they really paid attention, and some good ones have already figured it out and have done as good or a better job even than Carvana has, to Frank's point, and the vehicle experience that him and his wife had. Really good operators have figured it out. And that's the scalability problem Carvana faces, right? And in some ways, CarMax doesn't they'll get along and they have their process and they do the same thing. They're just not known for that, to your point. right? But dealers in their local area, once they get, once the technology and their adoption increases and we get past that early adoption phase, I believe you'll see that, consumers will demand it. And Carvana is not going to be the only one to do it. So the scalability would concern me. I would just tell you that I think that they have taken advantage of the economy, of COVID, and of the lower two quintiles of income that, otherwise might not have been able to get a car, frankly. And that I believe that parade's coming to an end because those lower two quintiles of income are going to continue to struggle, where the upper three presumably will stay level or continue to increase. So you're going to run out of cars to sell and people to sell them to, based on the market of what they've sold so far. That's my take.
I think the scalability thing too, which would be interesting, and I always go back to transparency, because when you put the magnifying glass on something, you kind of see. I was talking to a dealer in Texas, and they do very well with acquisition. The numbers they told me, I immediately was like, I don't know if I believe that, because they were like, oh, we're buying cars at like 68-70% cost to market. So I was like, jump on a Zoom right now. I want to see your V Auto, because I wanted to see this. And sure enough, in this pocket, they were like 71%. They legitimately were. And I was like, wow. And they're buying at a overly large scale. So knowing that, and like then possibly, and this would be the only way that it would make any type of sense, and it would be a completely nothing burger. Are they staying out of areas which would affect scalability that they can't compete in? For instance, I can tell you when Carvana, when they were in trouble, had a big presence in California. They were everywhere. I mean, it was like everywhere. And then they started losing licenses in states and getting in trouble and all these other things. I don't even know if they've got them all back in all 50 states, but they are rarely like a microcosm in California anymore. Like they're there, but they're not aggressive. But I know they're really aggressive in the Midwest. So maybe they're in areas, like you said, the lower two parts of income, but they're in areas where the market, there's still a shortage of inventory in the sense of there's not as much, but they're in a market where the demand isn't as much, so that consumer experience is actually creating that profitability, because they can transact so quick. Because some of the dealers, I can tell you from personal experience, one of my clients is in the Midwest, don't do things quite as easy, fast, and convenient for customers, because they're like, listen, this is how we've always done it. We just want to do more of it. So when I have dealers in California, you're in and out in 30 minutes, check in hand. It's got to be like this. So maybe that's where Carvana, giving just a little grace, because I do think there's some issues. However, maybe they're just transacting in areas that don't have that 2025 methodology of moving fast and convenient. They're still in the, the good old boy, or they're in that type of frame of mind where time's not important. And so they can actually make time valuable again. Because like when I tell people 30 minutes at a store in California, they're like, yeah, of course, it should only take 30 minutes. But if I say that in St. Louis, they're like, you can get me in and out in how long? Like it's a big surprise when you say something like that. So maybe their convenience is working in some of these areas that aren't as competitive, the San Franciscos, the New Yorks, that type of situation.
Well, and part of me wonders, Darrell, if they're not strategically placing themselves where they have ADESA auctions, right?
Yeah.
And they're transacting higher, closer to ADESAs, where they can store the inventory. They can get in and out quickly to get that inventory shipped it off. Like, I think about where I live, right? There's a Carvana in Schaumburg, Illinois, and guess what? There's an ADESA that's 10 minutes away. And so they have no problem moving cars around between those two. They act as, the ADESA auction acts as somewhat of as a hub, as a big box retailer, right? So I wonder if that's in play as well for them.
Well, they're pushing Mega Site, and then they're pushing same-day delivery. And Darrell, that was an awesome point. Maybe they are. They're killing it on convenience.
And like what Frank just said, which will be interesting, because like Jim, you were saying, when they start to put all these together, if they do it, give these guys their flowers, because they've done something that no one's been able to do it. However,
massive. Yeah.
If they're using ADESA as like the big box to the mega site type of situation, I see that the secondary problem to that is ADESA will become so hard to trust from a dealer perspective
Yeah.
that Carvana will have to be their main source of inventory, or sales will have to, because dealers are going to be, wait a minute, so you're basically using now the auction
Right.
as your retail lot, and then you're put that makes it to where, okay, are they working the dealer against the market, right? Which has already been a conversation, but that's where I think Carvana, the scalability comes in. How do you play in both those lanes? Mannheim, huge gorilla, right? You've got all these other ones, but none of them are in the retail stratosphere. Carvana
Right.
was the first one to attempt this or kind of have a version of this. And I think that's what actually will hold the scalability back, because then you lose that auction business, or they'll start going to other places because they feel like they're competing directly with your retail arm.
So Frank, since you work a lot with the auctions, I mean, ADESA today versus ADESA during the before the acquisition, I mean, that hasn't been that long, but beside the numbers of maybe market share drop, like what is that experience like going to ADESA? Is it changed dramatically for dealers? Because I don't go there. I haven't been at auctions in a while. Um, but I mean, at some point, like I think to Darrell's point is, if I'm hearing you right, is Carvana is going to be ADESA's biggest, maybe only customer pretty soon, right? Or could be at some point.
And again, that's the weight that the 700-pound gorilla carries.
Yeah.
And I say the 700-pound gorilla being CarMax. CarMax does not attend ADESA auctions, and so yes, if you're a dealer and you go there, there's a sometimes you find a little bit of a honeypot, and maybe I'm giving too much away of my trade secrets because I like to shop at ADESA.
I'm not writing anything down. Don't worry.
But the reality is that the minute CarMax pulled out of there and you could not get all the money, if you're a seller, what are you going to do? You're going to go elsewhere to sell your cars to where the big players standing in the lane and helping you to get that money for those cars. So it's very different in that I think the inventory certainly has slowed down quite a bit. But I think from a competitive sense, it's the auctions are just as competitive with ADESA because there's fewer cars there. But that if you're in on a car, you have a good shot at buying that car. Carvana is really not as active as people may think at ADESA, but certainly without a CarMax there, it's a game changer, and people feel good about that. I mean, I've been standing in the lane on both sides when I was with CarMax, and people go, "Oh man, CarMax is bidding on a car,
Step
fantastic. I'm not going to buy it." And I've been on the other side going, "Oh God, CarMax is bidding on another car." So when you don't have that in the lane, it's a game changer if you're a buyer, but certainly it's a game changer if you're a seller as well, and you're going to take that inventory to where it makes the most sense.
So would you say that Carvana is a bigger buyer customer to ADESA or seller customer to ADESA? I mean, does Carvana get a pre-sale list of what's being offered for sale, and they get to pick the cream puffs first, and then nobody else? I mean, is there any of that going on, or no?
No, I don't believe that at all. And in terms of being a seller, like I see a ton of CarMax or Carvana inventory on Mannheim as well. So
interesting.
They're selling in both places. They don't. I mean, I don't know that they really discriminate. You would think that they would sell just at ADESA, but they certainly don't.
Yeah,
I'm wondering what percentage of inventory that they are wholesaling because of those tight turn periods. Do you know, Frank?
I saw the number somewhere.
I don't know that.
I thought it was like 14. It was in the teens, upper teens, maybe percent of what they were buying. Maybe it's more, but I thought I saw that recent. It's out there because they published the GPU for the wholesale, and they talk about the percent of total units sold through that channel as well.
I just think about, again, if they're making a strong push for private party acquisition. They're doing, they're back on TV doing commercials, and they're talking more about that than anything else. And so,
really, are they? I was just thinking about commercials. I haven't seen a Carvana commercial in a long time.
Well, they launched a campaign. I'm sorry, Darrell.
Well, I was gonna say it's just Kristen Stewart and Dak Shepard. They've had that series, but if you look,
Oh, that's
oddly
right.
enough, Carvana hasn't had a sales commercial in a year.
Right.
All their commercials have went
That's what
back
I was
to
gonna,
acquisition.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. And there was, I read a little bit backstory on that, the campaigning around that. And again, because they're doing the valuation tracker where they're gonna send over time, they're counting on people maybe not biting at the first, offer, but maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later. That's something that they're counting on. So they're trying to build a bench of vehicles for that purpose. By if you go in there now and you basically get a value for your car 30 days from now, you'll every 30 days you'll get a valuation sent to you.
Yeah.
That makes sense because don't you need to be aggressive with? I mean, are there a million ways to buy or sell a car right now?
Well, you got the group of people on here to talk about it.
For sure.
The one thing I would,
I think that's another episode.
that's another episode.
Totally.
A million ways to buy or sell a car.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say though, like with Carvana has done, and let's just make the assumption that this is all smoke. It's a big nothing burger, and they figured out how to beat the math. And if that's the case, what I think will be interesting is they've now made it because they're recon.
Right.
They're not marking it up, right? They're not doing like just like CarMax. They have a very finite how they recon cars and how it costs. And they have their ADESAs now, which is their holding power. They have the titling. They've done some things that are great. And now they're acquiring cars. Is your only way now as a dealer, as they scale, if they are going to scale, is you're going to have to be more aggressive, which means Carvana and CarMax, I mean, let's not take them out of there too, because they are the elephant and the gorilla. I mean, they're fighting over the big market share. You're going to have to be more aggressive, which means the dealer, the AutoNation, the Lithia, the small store, right? The night on, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to be a completely different model if you want to compete in used cars. Because in order to, if they really scale this up, you're going to have to pay more or have a Nordstrom's type of experience in order to be at the same level or less for someone to want to do business with you, unless your trade efficiency is really well, your service drive, you're locking it in. But if you're going after private party or said auction, because the compression is going to be there, what they're doing is now, whether you like it or not, they're telling dealers the good old days, the way where you're going to like take someone to the moon and make these like, it's gone. Like if you want to be in the used car game, you're going to have to move fast and quick. Not saying you have to hold a whole huge inventory. You just can't be like, I'm trying to buy one car so I can make $4,000 front end, $3,000 back end, $2,000 in fix. And if they do scale, because CarMax already put that pressure on some dealers, especially with the Max Offer program. We can thank Frank for that, everybody. Okay, he did it. Okay, thank you, Frank. Okay, but let's say Carvana does this track your offer stuff, and then somehow comes up with something that maybe looks similar to that. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden there's a liquidation strategy, and now dealers go, well, I want this car, but Carvana says it's 20. CarMax says it's 20,003. Well, you're going to have to be higher than both of them to transact, which means you're now you're a forced volume game. There is no front end to have as compression tightens up. And like you said, Paul, if we want to be rainbows and unicorns, we're 6 years away from inventory levels being consistent again.
Right.
2026 will be the first lift where inventory comes back in. And then each year we'll slowly, but if it's 3 years of inventory being missing and then trade-ins not coming in, you're 7 years removed from being back to normal. I mean, that's just the math of what comes in, what gets depreciated, and what needs to be
returns, lease is down, all the rest. Yeah.
So I love the fact that they're doing that and like making it to where people have this transparency scale and they like can see the offer. I just would love to have a little bit more transparency and really love to have a couple dealers, right, where you have to have that conversation, say, okay, have you already shifted, or are you still on the hope bus hoping this goes away?
Yeah. Well, you talk about being aggressive, and that's what they're going to have to do to scale. But one thing we haven't talked about, there's two ways to be aggressive in the car business. You can be aggressive on what you buy and sell cars for, but on the financing side, that's where there needs to be more transparency with Carvana. Because, I mean, if you're an independent dealer like me, you rely on banks and credit unions and independent lenders. But if you have your own in-house you can pay more knowing you're going to sell for more and you're going to finance that difference. That's the other thing I can't figure. I haven't really put a whole number to it, but do the math is if they're doing 7,500, well, let's just go back to the, what was it, 3,600 on the retail GPU, and CarMax was what, 2,400 or 2,200. That difference, somebody's carrying that and financing that, unless they're able to get more down payment out of the buyers, which that's harder to do now. So my point is if you open up the books a little bit more on the financing side of Carvana, you might find some interesting flags. And a lot of those red flags amongst that 50 had to do with the financing and the warranties and the different things. And the extensions. Darrell, to your point, coming 15 years for GMAC, I started out repoing cars and doing collections. And there's absolutely generally accepted accounting principles on, I think the max is 120 days of extensions during a 48-month loan or something like that. And if they're doing that, that's trouble and problematic for them. But my point is you can be aggressive, you can pay more and you can do more if you can finance your own cars, because you can go, the bank may be doing on a given car 48 months, but if Carvana is willing to do 60 and they're willing to finance 130% versus 110%, that's a game changer for them. And that doesn't show up until they go to sell those loans and do different things with the loans and the delinquency and the extensions. But so I think Jay, you said at the beginning, are they a car company or are they a loan company? They're a loan company that sells cars.
Well, yeah.
I mean that's what they are. That's what they are.
And
Which is funny
is,
because they tout themselves as a technology company.
Exactly. Yeah, they're that too.
It
right?
is.
Car loan tech. We do it all.
The reality is that CarMax has done that for years, though, right? Like there was a reason why back in 09, 2010 we stopped using MMR in black books, because it really came down to what's the car worth to CarMax,
right?
And we had CarMax Auto Finance that could pick up really anything for us. So I mean, if anything, it would appear as Carvana is simply trying to follow a successful model in that, hey, get my own captive finance. Now, CarMax has Ally, they have Capital One, I think they have a couple other banks in there as well that pick up some of the subprime paper.
Right.
But for the most part, that high cost to market car that CarMax says, hey, look, I'm going to buy this car at 105 and I'm going to price it at 115%. Well, CarMax Auto Finance will finance that. No other bank will.
Right.
And so there could be some of that Carvana has that, and they're looking at it and saying, hey, if this is the successful playbook and we can sell those loans off, then let's follow that successful playbook. The other thing that I found really interesting is that that Cerberus is involved, and I did not know that.
Keep an eye on that,
because Cerberus was heavily involved and owned off-lease only. So I found that to be somewhat interesting as well. Not that I'm trying to correlate the two together, but certainly interesting.
Do you guys know what Cerberus means, or how they got what that word means actually?
Is that an Egyptian thing?
It's a Greek term, and it actually means it's a three-headed dog that guards the gate of the underworld. So just throwing it out there. I mean, you don't have to take anything.
And Frank, when you just talked
about man,
so Frank, when you just talked about the financing too, even you said like back in what was it, 06, 07 with CarMax, right? When you guys when you were tattooing paper with CarMax Auto Finance and you had to sell those, when those buckets fill and you got to get off that paper, then I think that's kind of what Jim was alluding to. Let's assume they're doing that. They're pushing that paper and they've got people smoked in these cars from a finance standpoint. They couldn't get out of them to save their life. Is when those buckets fill, because let's get real, that money only goes till it goes. And you have to start selling that off. That's when I think if you were going to see something come apart, not the scalability of the sales or the acquisition, is that finance arm is, you'll see all of a sudden they can't sell that. They stop buying. And that goes to what Paul said is, forget the inventory part of it. They can't buy it up now because they've been like, we'll say really focusing in, just, predatorily focusing in on some lower income people that couldn't get inventory. Is if they can't get that, Well, that's their business model then, right? If they can't sell that off because their bucket gets too big or their market cap gets to where they can't extend, well, whoever's behind that, right, is going to say, well, we're already at, let's just say 800 million. We can't do anymore. You got to sell off 500 million of this. It'd be
Yeah.
really interesting to see, does a bank say they want it? Right? Because then you look at these cars and like you said, if it was CarMax, you're like, these cars are worth that to us. That's simple. That's simple
Yeah.
math. You don't need MMR. You don't need this. But let's say Cap One is the one that's going to buy these loans, just for sake of argument. And they say, yeah, the 500 million you want to sell us is worth two, based on the
Right.
inventory, the depreciation, the current book values, whatever it may be. And they go, oh yeah, we can't do that. It gets into who's going to take on bad water, like who's going to make the bad decision to buy the overinflated valuation. And I think
Well,
that's the only thing that we wouldn't know without them actually open their books, which will never happen. But that's where the big bleed comes from. CarMax was smart enough to understand they diversified. They were doing a lot of their own, and then they diversified after they did it for a couple of years and used it as a piece, but not the strategy. If they're using this as the main strategy to pump market cap, that can bite you very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, who's highly leveraged? I mean, CarMax has always been very conservative, and they've never been highly leveraged. Carvana is, and Carvana, don't forget, has drive time. That's subprime, and they've not manipulate, but they learned how to underwrite bad paper, and then go back into the 2008 financial services crisis. It started with Lehman Brothers. I'm not trying to again paint Carvana in the same picture, but I've seen this movie, read this book, but that was real estate, and that was ABS ratings that were inaccurate. They were rating the paper as A when it was really B, and then once that was discovered, it created a complete landslide and domino effect. I'm not saying this is going to happen here again, but it has a lot of the red flags there. Whether they're intentional, whether they're illegal, I'm not the one to say that. I'm not an expert at that, but it's just interesting. It's very interesting.
It
Let's
really
say
is.
it like this. If one of us was doing something like this, I don't think we would get away with it.
See, isn't that the rub right there? I mean,
Yeah.
a private bailout's still a bailout, right?
I
You know,
mean,
guys-
if I had $800 million, you can make a lot of problems disappear when you pay the right people. I mean,
Right.
if Frank and I decided we just wanted to go ahead and say we were worth something and we had all these red flags, I certainly think our business model would be cooked in about 3 months. So it's very odd you could have 30, 40, 50 red flags and you're just increasing by 42 times. Like it's nothing.
What do we think, given all what we said, are the likely potential outcomes as a result of, of these flags, right? What are those paths? Obviously, one is
Right.
bankruptcy, one is they fool us all again and add another burger to the stack, and then what's the thing in the middle?
Love
But
that.
I think the fourth quarter will reveal a lot of that. We'll either have a new set of flags. It'll be the same red flags still there, producing numbers that they can no longer sustain. I believe maybe if they can sustain it, it'll be a huge victory for them. Particularly if they can do it for fourth quarter last year and first quarter this year. Then the model works, and like you said, Darrell, they made it. They did it. They pulled it off.
What
But I haven't
what
seen it
could
yet.
what could be another burger on the stack?
Well, I could see them going down in sales, but keeping the same profit margins where they don't scale up into certain areas. Like I was saying, like they're like, hey, we ain't playing in California, we're not playing in New York, we're not playing in these overcompressed markets. And maybe because it shrinks for a year, you think, oh, there's a problem, but no, they still keep a $3,000 average, 7,000 with all their finance, but they lose 7%, right? Which in the scale of things, you'd be like, they're winning, but
Yeah.
it's just because they stay in that market, and that would still be a win, right? Even if they lost like a total amount, but they kept that same level of what they're doing, that'd be a win, because then when it peaks back up, if they beat the market, if the market goes down 15%, but they only go 7, they're winning. And then they could go back up. I'm telling you, the only way I see this to where they go bankrupt again, and the funding group says they don't want any part of it and everything like that, like what happened when they almost bankrupted the Blackstone Group, so they wanted to defund that whole section, right? Which was the first time that they ever wanted to do that. Is if you find out in the banking side that they've been pushing these loans and they're over leveraged, that, like you said, they're 135%, no credit union would have touched this type of scale, and they can't get off of it, because then your leverage point becomes to the point where you can't loan. And then, like you said, Paul, you take your top 3 people, and that's where Frank got his car. But are there enough people transacting with Carvana, right, to then make up that, right? Because they have had a business model of going after the people that couldn't get cars and saying yes because of drive time. You start losing one of those two things, and then that could be a big slump. So if they end up, we sold just as many cars next year, or they 7% down, but the same amount of profit, then they got off their loans and they're in good shape. If all of a sudden you see they're 30% down because they don't have those loans to give out anymore, they don't have that, then I think that you see it go down. I don't think they go away. I think you see it go down to where CarMax goes back to where we know them to be, the boring on top, that's steady Eddie. And then Carvana somewhere here in this conversation that they're there, but they're only there in certain markets, right? I think that's the more pliable way, because if it ends up being any type of banking fiasco, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
You can't survive like an '08 in the housing market in the auto industry.
You can't outrun it is the problem now. And
that's how it's always been in the car business. They make, at the dealer level, they make sales or don't make sales because of what the banks want to do. They're really the ones running the show in the car business. I mean, whether it's at a macro level or micro level,
one burger they might throw on top of the pile is if they're good. They seem to be pretty good at acquisition. I haven't met a dealer yet who's shunned a $900 wholesale profit, on a quick turnaround. So if what may give them some, sustain them for a little while is if they can, catch some of that fire of increasing their acquisition of those private party vehicles. Because again, that seems to be a focus and aim, certainly in their marketing messaging. You would think that's because they know no matter what they take in, whether it's retail or wholesale, they'll find a place for it. So they might be playing a wholesale volume game potentially.
Well, the only other burger that I could see on top would be if there's something with Ally that were to come out. If if someone were to investigate Ally and all of a sudden that's a problem. Now to me, that's a smoking gun at that point, right?
But they've got, talk about left pocket, right pocket, moving the money around. This is your pocket. I want to go really dark. Isn't there another burger we can add to get another $1 billion cash out? There's got to be. Isn't that one of the options here?
Of course.
I think that's called. Didn't Burger King come out with that and call it the Impossible Burger?
Yeah.
Okay, and they sold that.
They did.
I don't think it did well.
The meatless.
Well, that's what I'm saying is
burger.
If they created their version of a max offer, let's say, where they say they'll give money to a dealer if they liquidate the car and they get those cars, and they know they can make the 900. So where they throw that little $1 billion burger on it and they go like this, hey, we're now making 500, but we're getting all these cars. I could see them riding that scale for a couple months.
Sense.
Yeah,
I could see them doing that, right?
Yeah.
Now the thing is what Paul said that I think we should definitely put in there, especially because a dealer's going to watch this. Okay, I said it. Don't blame these 3 guys. Okay, I'm the guy that says stuff like this. They would never say this. Dealers, Carvana's going to make it, and it's all your fault. Saying it directly to you, and this is why. Frank said it to me, or I've been talking to Frank about this. My first buying center was in 2011. Okay, when I went to private party acquisition, I had a CarMax across the street from me, and I put a sign up saying I'll beat CarMax. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to go fight that elephant right out of the gate. We're in 2025, and dealers are still like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do private party, and I don't know if I want to have a wholesale leg in my acquisition thing and make product. And so because dealers are so damn scared, lazy, and cheap, they're going to allow Carvana to make it and take market share because you don't want to get in the game. Because if you did, you would have called Frank, you would have called Jim, you definitely would have called me because I have the largest buying centers in the country making millions of dollars, and I take business from all the time. But they don't, and that's okay. But then when this happens, and you go like this, why is Carvana and CarMax kicking our ass? All you have to do is go in your bathroom, look in the mirror, and say, "It's you."
Tough medicine.
Tough medicine.
I wouldn't have said it better myself.
I love Darrell. He just puts it out there, man.
That's a sign of a war. What do they call it? He's been out there on the battlefield for a long time, man.
He's got battle scars.
The trademark phrase is "the truth hurts only when it should." So if it hurts your feelings,
I was just gonna say that's the one thing that caught my attention when I saw you on social media when you had that line. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. The truth hurts when it should. I love it.
Wow. All right, mic drop. Gentlemen, Paul, Darrell, Frank, Jim. That was amazing. As Jim knows, from time to time, I like to, well, number one, I like to go around the full ecosystem. Logistics, auction, dealer, OEM. I'm actually looking for, I want to do another auction topic in the next 60 days. Something solid. Okay. So see if you can help me on that one. If there is another dealer angle, this Hindenburg research report, for example, popped out of the sky January 2nd, right? Here it is a month later, got the show going. The news cycle's crazy. Something crazy is going to happen in the next 4 to 8 hours that could be a show in May. So help me keep a finger on the pulse, Darrell.
Listen, if you want something to really stir it up, okay? The delays just happened for 30 days, but the tariffs for the automobile business is the key to saving used car business.
Whoa.
The key to regaining and reducing market compression.
I want to tune into that.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. So you're going to help me keep a finger on the pulse because, all right, let's do a speculation live. How many times are we going to delay? When are we going to get into these tariffs that were dreaded 16 hours ago?
Right.
When is it going to? Yeah.
I would say the tariffs for Mexico happened before Canada, simply because there's so many other things that they didn't put in the news cycle that if they did it to Canada would actually really cause problems for us. But Mexico, that's the one actually, and I know I'm probably the unpopular opinion, I would love to see it today. But I think it's going to get delayed 2 more times, so it'll take 90 days. And that's where a lot of cars get made. If cars get reduced, used car values go up.
Yep.
Or they have to lower the cost of production so that they can produce more so that we'll buy more. Either way, used cars get a lift if the tariffs affect the automobile business where they're built.
All right. So, that's great, right? Tariffs, right? Okay.
At least for the automobiles. I don't know if I want it on everything else, but at least for the automobiles, okay? Right. But that's only because I'm not a big fan of new cars until they're sold. And then I think they're great because they're used cars.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I like it.
Really hard to know that. I mean, he's probably right. It's probably going to be a couple of cycles beforehand. 90 days sounds right.
But he's going to keep putting it back on the table. I mean, this isn't just a sheer bluff. This is all right. Right. You made the mortgage. Let's talk again in 30 days.
A shot across the bow. People, when they hear that saying, they dismiss it as shot across the bow is like they could hit you if they wanted to now. Like they have you within range.
That's right.
You know that you said that it could be a bluff. Actually, maybe one of them is, right? Tariffs were supposed to be on Mexico, Canada, and China. China went into effect, and then the other 2 delayed. So maybe this was like the real thing was to hit China, right? Like that was like for political reasons or whatever it may be. That's the big splash. And then another one's coming, but maybe not all 3 were really meant to happen.
Some of the side bets doesn't care, right?
Yeah, like it was like if I throw 3 dice, I'm only looking for one of these things to land 6.
Yeah, right.
Because the Canada thing, I mean, that just seemed like, I don't know, left field to me. But I mean, I'm not standing next to him, so who knows? And then I didn't even talk about the federal freeze. A week ago, the federal freeze had people freaking out. Now it's like, yeah, federal freeze.
Well, and then
like
today he wants to abolish. Now today he wants to abolish the education sector, right? Which so, I think he's for the first 100 days. Each day is going to be another one of these like
it's like Christmas
outlandish things. You go like this. Oh wait, we're defunding nuclear weapons. I mean, it's going to be like every day you're going to be like, what's the next thing he signed to get the news cycle? It reminds me, because I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so go Birds, Super Bowl. But it reminds me like I'm watching Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys right now. Like every day he's just trying to be in the news cycle with something new.
Drama, yeah. It works for him. He's getting stuff done.
It's working. So it's. I mean, even Jerry Jones said his Netflix special is coming out, but I watched a little clip of it. And it says he wants the Dallas Cowboys to be a soap opera all the time. And when you think about it, it's like, they played a little clip
Below
of it.
Deck with the Cowboys.
I wanted to. Yeah, and so he says this little clip. As I want it to be a soap opera, I want it to be all the time, 365 all the time. Well, it works because you're always talking about them. If you're always talking about them, you're not worrying about the other things that are happening. So it's hard to like. Who cares if they win a Super Bowl? They're still the most profit or the richest franchise in history, right? So you go, it's got to be working. So I think with all these distractions, it kind of leads you to go. If you hear three things and you miss the one that was supposed to happen, it happens, and you're like. Who cares, right? It's just China. And then you hear something else. Oh, now he wants to throw out education. Oh, who cares because he just did this. And then you don't even realize that it's like this big thing because he gets one piece of what he was trying to actually get done. Yeah. Right? So it's like chaos theory.
Well, he's going to need a long line of White House press secretaries on deck.
Yeah, that poor girl's getting shelled. Yeah, that poor girl's getting shelled. Yeah.
It's going to freak out.
But you know what? Hey, she handles it well. She handles it with class every time.
She's great. Yeah, no, she's doing great.
You should hire Schwarzenegger for that role. Imagine that.
He might.
Agree with that.
Probably do it.
Next question.
All right, I'm going to cut it there. So good. So we've got something in the works. May, tariffs. Let me know if you see, keep in touch. Jim, I really appreciate you bringing your friends, my friends now. Paul, Darrell,
my new friends, yeah.
Jim, my friends now, our friends. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay.
Have a good night. And that's a cut. All right, cool. Yeah, that was kind of a long show. Like I was thinking, kind of like my old shows. And thank you, Peter, and Kanisha, and Jeff, and Moozy for saying hello in the live chat. I don't always worry about the live chat in that, sometimes a live chat's, when Cheers is kicking in and everyone's getting their beers. But other times it is a sign that there's just some really interesting conversation going on. What is also interesting about this show is the YouTube views and the LinkedIn views were much closer in number than most shows. Most shows, there's a definite lopside to that. So this is an interesting topic, and it could be this topic could be a nothing burger. But I think that when you tune in, when you watch this, if you watch it on demand, if you listen to the podcast, there is a lot of interesting conversation. There is some speculation. There's definitely some look at the research report evidence. There's also, it's easy to take a side and ignore things you don't want to. That's another thing that I think that, I don't really care that Hindenburg, whatever their agenda is. I read the document. When I first saw this and I started reading it, I thought, if even half of this is true, and there's a lot here, if even half of this is true, that's fascinating. And then you've got the Garcias are interesting. The market is fascinating. That's a lot of competition. It's not the same thing as Amazon. When Jeff Bezos built Amazon and chipped away at that rock forever, I mean, he was on a unique path. And while there are unique aspects of the Carvana path, there's thousands of dealers and hundreds of people that will give you an appraisal on your car right now. So within the vehicle acquisition and the retail, I just don't know how you're raking in cash like that and able to just cash out like that. I don't see it. I don't get it. All right, cool. I want to thank Superflow Systems, Murphy Auto Transport, Draver, and the panel. Thank you, Jim, Frank, Darrell, Paul, and thanks everybody for jumping in the live chat and watching ATI. Please do join me on Thursday at noon Central Time. We're going to talk about dispatch mines on our industry logistics segment of ATI. It's Tuesday night for the big show. Thursdays on industry logistics. Oh, and the big show next Tuesday is MBSI. So we're going to go back to remarketing sector with repossession, forwarders, lenders, etc. So please do join us for that. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I'll see you on the next installment on ATI Auto Business. Good night, everybody.